Yep.
Welcome back again to Long Way to the Top. I've got with me now the king of cool, Ross Wilson. How are you, Ross? Straight off stage, how was it?
Yeah, it was, we're heading towards the finish line on this, so it's pretty relaxed now.
But
Yeah.
you are the king of cool. Everyone every night stands at the side of stage and watches you and has a great time.
Yeah, people have been saying really nice things to me whenever I come off stage, which is great, you know.
How many of the acts on the show have you actually played with before, worked with before?
Well, I mean, some of them I started off with in Daddy Cool days. Spectrum were kind of like our brother band. It was like a fraternity, you know. We had the same agent, same manager, and we used to play a lot of gigs together. Same with Chain. So I'm familiar with quite a few of the people on the bill.
In that second act, I guess we have got a very strong Melbourne base of artists, and it was one thing that was very important when we started researching how many acts were going to come on the show with us, that there was a massive amount of artistry that came out of Melbourne in that time.
Yeah, but those acts that you... Melbourne was more of a focus place. The acts that you're referring to, I think, which are Spectrum, Chain, and who else? Well,
yourself?
Myself. Well, I was Melbourne-based, but there was...
Lobby?
Lobby Lloyd. They all actually came from other places. You know, quite a few of those people came from, like, Brisbane. Say the Masters Apprentices, they came from Adelaide. Phil Manning was from Tasmania, and you know, and they all came to Melbourne because there was a certain thing going on there, and then they stayed there. You know, and that's the city that influenced them to write that music, you know.
Do you think that was because the venues were very strong at that time in Melbourne?
There was a lot of places to play, yeah. And it was on that cusp of just before the liquor laws had been changed and that moved out of the inner city clubs and the community centres into the pubs, you know, which changed everything.
We've also noticed a lot of people tonight have talked about how strong the Melbourne crowds are. The response in Melbourne seems to be extraordinary. You must feel that very much for yourself.
It's always been a real music town, and that's it. I think Melbourne's not so much a glitzy place. It's a lot, you know, they respect art and whatever it is, and I always feel more famous in Sydney because people, you know, come up to you and say stuff and that. In Melbourne, that's very uncool to do. You just leave you alone and... There's Ross Wilson sitting over there. Oh, that's cool.
Have you had a favourite gig so far out of all the 18 gigs we've done?
Yeah, there was one night that stood out for me. It was the second night in Adelaide. Everything just seemed to, sound-wise and the feels of the songs and all that seemed to slot together the best of all of them for me.
You're obviously one of our most precious singer-songwriters in Australia, and do you think you've heard any singer-songwriters around today that match what you were doing in the 70s?
Well, that's hard to say. I mean, there are a lot of really good people around. The test of a good singer-songwriter for me is people that, like I did, you write the songs without any expectation of success. It's something that comes, you know, sometimes through a lot of luck, whether you're in the right place at the right time, but the songs exist anyway, you know, and you feel that you have some kind of responsibility to get them heard, so that has an effect on it. A good friend of mine who's just turned 50 is, you know, who I write songs with, is releasing his first CD this year. The other unifying force is that we all share similar experiences. You know, we do have a depth of experience that we don't even have to talk about. You know, we just, there's a mutual respect for anybody who's lasted the distance, you know. And they should actually be giving us medals on the last night for still being around, you know, and being able to pull it out and whip it out again, you know.
Well, I'd say we're all fairly deafened and exhausted by now. It's the end of the show. We've had Billy and the Sunbury Aztecs on, and they're joining us straight off stage. How are you all? Okay? How was the show for you tonight? You've got an awful lot of Band-Aids on there, Rats. You coping, or is it a bit much?
Ran out of toilet paper in the dunny, so I
terrible.
Burnt his finger.
One of the great things also was reading your books, Bill, when you really encapsulate all those amazing times, and it's one of the first times that an Australian rock icon has actually done that. What made you write those stories?
Money.
Come on.
It was actually as a result of a 60 Minutes interview, and they had it so wrong in terms of what had gone down, what had happened, that it really started me thinking. And I also had a throat operation. I had 30 stitches in my throat, and I couldn't talk for 3 months.
That would have been fantastic.
Nearly killed me.
How come I wasn't around when that happened?
I was just thinking the same thing, Rex.
And I started writing, and a lot of stuff started to come out, and I realised it was the characters, you know. I mean, there were so many great characters around in those days. There's a few of them. People like Scrooge, the roadie, who's on the show, and Chucky, of course, because Chucky roadied for us for a while.
Yeah, really.
It was just fun. There was just so much laughter.
Do you think Sunbury was a really defining era in Australian music? The whole festival philosophy really changed Australian music?
Sunbury was a summation of everything that had gone before, because it was such a vibrant scene in Melbourne, and there were so many good bands, and the people were so involved in it. It was close to Melbourne. It wasn't a hippie festival, it was a rock festival. It was a summary to me.
Do you look out in the audience now at night and think, gee, they were actually the same people that were there?
Some of them definitely, they look like me, so they probably they were there. Yeah.
What I find funny is looking at all these people who on the street look fairly straight, knowing that they were all ripped on acid and speed and smoking dope and drinking booze and yelling and screaming.
The difference was back in those days we used to say, show us your tits. Now we say, show us your tooth.
Also,
But that's all that's changed.
what was different is that after Sunbury, all those large speakers which were provided to play to 30,000 people outdoors were taken into small clubs in Melbourne and
Defining
set up.
the sound that
and
was
that
Billy Thorpe and the
changed
Aztecs.
music in
No, pub
Australia
rock.
quite dramatically.
We always pushed
Absolutely.
We went from
Yeah,
two-column PAs to large teeth to the ceiling and right through the stage. That's all was the PAs that were hired on the spot. And they've remained here till today indoors. You're listening to outdoor equipment.
What's it been like for you, Bill? I mean, it was your dream, it was your idea in the first place. It was over a year ago that you actually went to Michael with the whole concept of this. What's it been like for you?
Tomorrow it ends, and I don't know how. I think we're all just going to have to move into a house together for the rest of our lives, you know.
That sounds
I
like
no